I'm Rona Dhòmhnallach, I'm the Gaelic Arts Officer here at Glasgow Life. Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, Gaelic is be through. Anyone have Gaelic? Does anyone know about Gaelic that's not from Scotland? I suppose it's been really interesting. I didn't know really what to talk about. We've got this project for the Glasgow Gaelic map, but listening to Rona and just getting into the spirit of probably what you were talking about yesterday, and I'm so sad I missed, about my own personal journey, and you just can't help but think about the person, because Gaelic is political for me. It's not just my job, it's my children speak Gaelic, I speak Gaelic, and I'm very interested in the survival of the language, so I can't help but sort of reflect back on that. I'm from the island of South Uist, in the Western Isles of Scotland, and I came down to Glasgow when I was 19 to go to university, and there was no discussion about where else I was going to go. It was always going to be Glasgow, because Glasgow is known in Gaelic as Ballamore and the Gael, the big city of Gaels, and there's this been massive big sort of umbilical cord between Gaelic-speaking Scotland and Glasgow, and that's for historical reasons. But that's why I'm here. I suppose that migration's first started, it's been happening forever obviously, but just in terms of mass clearances and movements of people after 17, I hope you might know this history already, so please excuse me, but very briefly, 1745 was the Battle of Culloden in Scotland, and that was when the Jacobites lost, and as a consequence of that, Gaelic was officially neglected from that point until about 2005. The clan system broke up, so it meant that there was no support for Gaelic speakers, and then that meant that in terms of the economics of the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, there were opportunities to make money for landowners, so people had to move up the land, and that's the Highland clearances, and people started coming down to Glasgow, and further afield, people were put on boats and sent over to the Americas, etc. And that's a big thing in our, we still talk about it, and that was 1745, and it still affects us, and we're still sad about that massive big loss, because that has had a consequence on our language and how many people speak the language in this country. Scotland is the only place that can look after that language. And I suppose when you start thinking about migration, I was thinking when Tabora was speaking about what do you lose when you lose a language. And I think that's what we have to focus on. It's not about words, it's everything that comes with the words, the colours, and the ideas, and your connection. And I think the thing for Gaelic is the connection is very, very strong to land. And simply because you have to work the land, we had to work the land, so the language is very much based on that connection. When you come to the city, you can feel quite different about that. It can become quite abstract because you've got concrete all around you, and you don't have that reason to need language to manage the land. So one example I give you is there's 73 words for wave in Gaelic. The reason that that's there, it's not because it's a ridiculously poetic language, like all languages are, but it's because people needed these 73 words in one way or another to be able to describe it for their livelihood. So these are just questions about why language is important. Anyway, so in Glasgow, it's meant that there's a massive big footprint from the Gaelic community. Since the 1900s, communities have been coming to, please stop me because I will ramble.
All right, you've got a minute.
Oh my God. In this map that I'm going to give you, you'll see that from the 19th century that various different communities came down to Glasgow from all these areas that were cleared. So the picture of that is that there's associations, there's 10 associations in Glasgow that have been sort of welfare groups that have looked after people that have come down to the city. The Lewis and Harris, the Uist and Barra, the Sutherland, the Tyree, and so forth, and you can read it all in there. And they started, the oldest one is the Sutherland one, which is probably the most poignant because that's the area that was more brutally cleared than anywhere else. But it was Glasgow they came to. And so that's here. But it's interesting, when you look at all the museums, there's not one collection that represents the Gaelic community. And it's great hearing about personal stories, recording personal stories, I'm really interested in that, and I think that's important for kids today in Glasgow, is to be able to tell who they are, what their story is as Glasgow Gaels, not as kids from. And then if you consider that in Glasgow, 50% of the population have got either Gaelic or Irish in their family background. So that doesn't mean that they're speaking it, but they've got an empathy. There's a hearts and minds thing that they've got. They want to support it, but they're finding different ways. It's probably quite difficult to support because it's not that visual. But 50% of Glasgow is about 350,000 people, which is massive. And I suppose that these things all coincided with these mass migrations. And then the contribution that the Gaels made to Glasgow, again, in terms of building infrastructure and churches and roads. And I noticed just through there the old Govan Parish Church. That was built by Gaels. It's the one building in Glasgow that has a massive big connection, but it's not mentioned on the board. No criticism. It's just actually the truth. You know, it's there's been impacts that have gone unrecorded. So we have got this map, which we started. We did for the CAMOC Games Culture 2014, which is called Glasgow Gaidhlig, which shows you a wee bit about the history, and it also shows you we started translating some of the places, but a lot of it we don't have to translate. So Ballavoin, does anyone know what Ballavoin is? Ballavoin is Govan, and it was called Ballavoin before it was called Govan because it was in the Gaelic language first. The same with, I was there yesterday doing an art workshop. Bala Valley, where's that? Bailiston. There's loads of places that have got direct links with Gaelic. So we didn't have to do too much of that translation. And here, we've given a wee indication about where you can find Gaelic now. You know, the small snippets. So, for example, if you're at the Museum of Religion, in the 1970s, a friend of mine did all the translations and the labels into Gaelic. I think some of them still survive. If you go to Queen's Park, you'll see some poetry in a stone by Sorley MacLean. If you go to Cappic and Dolphy, you'll see Joe V. Joe Venachug, good food, good blessing. So you see these wee tiny bits, but there's nothing massive. So we started doing this map with a view to raising that profile so that we can animate Gaelic within the city. That's relevant and appropriate, and in the context of this multicultural city. You know, it's not about putting it over here, it's just acknowledging that that's what it is, it's part of it. So we're quite interested in public art and trying to raise the awareness that way, and we hope that that's going to be the culmination of this project. And we're gathering photographs just now. We've no resources to do it yet, so it's just an aspiration, it's me talking about it. I think if I talk about it, it might happen. We talk about the relationship between the Clyde and the river and how, and it's a really great metaphor because lots of different communities and lots of different languages came in on the Clyde. Am I over time?
Yeah.
The Hielemans umbrella. The Hielemans umbrella. Does everyone know where the Hielemans umbrella is? The Glaswegians will, but. So there's a place in town which is just the bridge at Central Station. And that's where my mum and dad would meet. So they came down to go to their dances, and all the Gaelic-speaking folk would meet there, and that's why it's called the Hielemans Umbrella. I'd love to do a project there. I'm rambling. Please take a copy of this. I should have had an assistant, eh? Thank you for inviting me, Crawford, and please come and chat to me afterwards.